So happy Sunday afternoon, everybody. My name is Valerie. I'm the nursing manager at Wildwoods. And thank you so much for coming to this program of keeping wildlife wild. And I'm just going to kind of go over kind of what Wildwoods does in terms of wildlife rehabilitation and how we work to kind of keep animals in the wild whenever possible. And there'll be time for questions towards the end. I'll be sharing kind of a PowerPoint program, so I won't be able to stop very easily during that part, but towards the end, there'll definitely time for questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Great. So if you're not familiar with Wildwoods, our mission is to promote understanding, appreciation, and well-being of wildlife in the world we share through compassion, care, and community. Wildwoods is a nonprofit wildlife rehabilitation organization in Duluth, Minnesota, and work to help orphan, sick, and injured animals and educate people on ways to reduce human and wildlife conflict. We have permits to do wildlife rehabilitation. We have two permits. We have a federal permit and a state permit. Mammals, non-migratory birds, reptiles, all those fall underneath the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources permit, and migratory birds fall underneath the United States Fish and Wildlife Service permit. And so to get the federal permit, you already have to have a state DNR permit. To get the state permit, the applicant will have to pass a written test, have experienced animals, have a rehabilitator act as their mentor, have a veterinarian agree to treat their animals when necessary, and also pass a facilities inspection. And then to obtain a federal permit, many of those same requirements apply apart from the actual written test. And so a person can only apply for the federal permit after they get the state permit. And not every rehabilitator wants a federal permit or to rehabilitate migratory birds. So it's not a requirement for them. If they don't want to do that. So what happens during wildlife rehabilitation? So we take in different kinds of animals, and one of those types are orphaned wildlife. And so last year we received about 527 orphaned animals in 2021. That includes gray squirrels, red squirrels, eastern cottontails, pigeons, robins, and various other songbirds. So staff and volunteers feed the baby animals the appropriate food for their species in order to meet their nutritional needs. So not every animal is going to get the same kind of food as young. So even, there's a difference between the formula that baby squirrels get versus baby rabbits get, because their nutritional needs are going to be different. And obviously birds can be very different from their diets can be very different from mammal diet. So we also try and feed them as many times as their mom would feed them during the day to get their nutritional needs to them. So baby squirrels are fed about 5 times a day. Cottontails are fed twice a day. And I think there's someone.
Yeah, Valerie.
Yep. Is there someone able? Let me see. I'm going to start. Mute people. Sorry. I think that's everybody. So apologies for the extra sound. Okay, so like I was saying, baby squirrels are fed about 5 times a day when they are really young. And cottontails only fed twice a day, and baby birds, when they're nestlings, are fed about every 15 minutes. So it's really busy during baby season. Animals also develop differently depending on their species. So when we get baby squirrels in, they are in our care for about 2 to 3 months, depending on how old they are when they arrive. bunnies for about a month, and also birds for about a month until they're able to be released back into the wild. And so our goal is to release an animal where it was found. If that's not possible, then we release it in an appropriate habitat where there's enough food and shelter to meet the needs of that animal, but also it's not going to be overpopulated by others of its own species, because that's not going to be healthy for the environment or for that animal. Okay, so these are some of the orphan animals that we've gotten in the past. Ducklings, some baby squirrels down here. These are little baby red squirrels, which are my favorite kind of squirrel. Some songbirds up in the upper right-hand corner, and then a little opossum, which is odd for this area because we don't actually have opossums this far north, but I guess a couple of years ago, there are some people who took their camper up to northern Minnesota to go camping, and they didn't realize they had a little hitchhiker. And so this little guy was left behind by his mom, and the family that was camping didn't find him until they're up here. So he came to Wildwoods, and because it's best for him to be with other opossums, he was transferred to another rehab facility in Roseville, the Wildlife Rehab Center in Roseville, so he could be raised with other opossums. We also get sick wildlife at Wildwoods. So when animals come to Wildwoods due to sickness, they're caused by different things. So poisoning, parasites, other diseases. So it could be like chemical sprayed for insect infestations, or someone has put out poison for mice or rats that animals have gotten into. West Nile virus in birds. They could have parasites like bot flies or Bales procyon, which is a roundworm, and also distemper. So in some of these cases that we're able to give treatment to these animals, and hopefully in hopes they'll eventually be released. But there are some instances where the animal either dies in care or is immunely euthanized if treatment's not going to be a viable option. Not all of these things are treatable. Distemper, for example, is not treatable. And so humane euthanasia is not the most pleasant part of the job of working with wildlife, but it's definitely an important part of it. So there are some sicknesses that we see in some of the animals that we get. One of the more common ones is going to be the fox and left. It has mange, and mange is caused by a mite. Mange actually in humans is called scabies, but humans are typically able to treat their themselves a little easier than wildlife is, obviously. And so it causes a lot of skin irritation and can cause kind of this crustiness on their skin, and that kind of causes a lot of other issues like emaciation, dehydration. So mange is treatable. Sometimes though, in cases where there's a severe dehydration and emaciation, it may not be treatable or able to recover from that. But in most cases that it is treatable. Then we have on the lower right-hand corner, pine grosbeak with conjunctivitis, and that's something that's also treatable, but also very contagious. So we have to isolate birds that have conjunctivitis so it doesn't spread to other birds. And then above that, we have little baby raccoons, which they are totally fine, but they do carry Bales ascaris, which is a raccoon roundworm, and it's totally fine within their body, but they actually shed they can shed millions of eggs a day, and then other animals will come into contact with their feces, and then they'll get Bales ascaris in their body. But when that roundworm gets into a different species body, that starts to wander and usually causes neurological issues. So Bales ascaris not a very pleasant thing to deal with. And we also get injured wildlife as well as sick and orphaned. So they come with different kinds of injuries caused by different things. So we get a lot of animals are hit by cars. We did have one animal that was hit by a train, attacked by a cat or dog, attacked by a wild animal, or hit a window. So those are some examples of what causes the trauma that for animals that come into us. There is a big difference though between being a wild animal being attacked by a cat or dog, or a wild animal being attacked by a wild animal. One of those things is part of nature, and one of those is not. So wild animal being attacked by a cat or dog, whether it's a pet or it's, a feral cat or dog, we want to kind of interrupt that, because the cat or dog's not a part of nature or that environment, so they shouldn't be interacting with wildlife. So we do encourage people to kind of intervene at that time. However, we do get a lot of calls about wild animals being attacked by wild animals, and that's something that is natural. So, animals are prey species or animals that are predator species, and they're going to interact, and that is a part of nature. And it's not always the most pleasant thing to witness, but it is important that happens. So we, especially with baby season, we get a lot of calls like, oh, I saved this baby bunny from being attacked from this crow that was attacking it. But that's natural for the crow to eat a bunny or another animal. And a lot of times, because of the injuries that baby has, that it's not treatable for that animal. A lot of times they have pretty severe injuries, so we end up having to humanely euthanize it. And so that's kind of a meal that's missed out by that crow. Then they have to go to find something else to eat. So it's more energy they have to expend to hunt for themselves, and also they're young as well. So again, it's not the most pleasant, but we do encourage people kind of leave that kind of interaction be. We don't want people intervening for wild animals interacting with other wild animals. But when we do get wild animals that are injured, they're going to be under a tremendous amount of stress, which is only made worse when they come to Wildwoods, because they're in pain and they're injured, and they have all these big giant creatures, which they use predators, touching them and probably moving their body in ways that it hurts, even though we're trying to, be gentle and efficient to try and prevent that from happening. So we want to perform our exam as efficiently and quickly as possible, and we want to protect our staff and not cause further injury to the animal. So they've sustained serious injuries, and they may need to be humanely euthanized if the injuries are too severe. Again, a very necessary part of wildlife rehabilitation, but not the most pleasant. Again, we want to make sure that when we're working with injured animals and injured wildlife, we're doing it really quickly and efficiently, because again, we are giant predators to them. So if we can imagine, like, if we broke our arm and this guy comes to try and set our broken arm, it's not going to make us feel very comfortable, even when we say things like, oh, I'm just trying to here to help you. That's not going to that's not going to make me feel very much better. So that's something that we have to, kind of keep in mind, is that our intentions are good, but the animal does not know our intentions. So we have to just be very efficient and quick, and not kind of handle them more than necessary, and give them the care that they need. So here are some patients that have come to Wildwoods with various injuries. On the top left-hand corner, there's a snapping turtle with an injury to its shell. And snapping turtles and turtles in general are very hardy animals. They do sustain some even more severe injuries to their shell than that up there. They're really good healers. They can their shells heal really well. Sometimes they have to be fused together with other materials so it can grow back. But they also can feel through their shells. Their shell is not made of bone. It's actually made of keratin. It's really thick keratin. So like fingernails made of keratin that's really, really thick. And they do have nerve endings in their shell. So they can feel through their shell. So they're pretty tremendous healers as well. So below the snapping turtle, there's a great horned owl. that like was caught in a leg hold trap, and then next to is a bobcat that I believe was also caught in a leg hold trap, and I believe the bobcat was able to be released eventually. And then on the very right, there is an American robin that has a beak injury. So the tip of the top part of the beak is missing, which sometimes happens. Bird beaks are made also of keratin. So kind of like our fingernails, they're always growing. And so beak injuries like this, a lot of times they are able to grow back depending on how much broke off. So it is something that is treatable, but we just have to make sure that it grows back all the way and they're still able to find and eat their food properly before they get released. Another big part of what we do at Wildwoods is we try and prevent animals from coming to Wildwoods at all, because there's many circumstances where it's actually unnecessary for an animal to be brought to Wildwoods. So the staff, we spend a lot of time talking to members of the community on the phone, determining if an animal needs to be rescued or not. And so one of the most common scenarios involves baby animals that people think are orphaned. Some are truly orphaned, but most are actually not. So it's always better to call Wildwoods before doing anything with a baby animal, so they're not accidentally kidnapped. Because the best care a baby animal can get is actually from its mother. And so you may think that it coming to Wildwoods is the best thing that can happen. The best thing is to stay with its mom. So that's what we want to have happen for that animal. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. But one of the things we do is try and prevent, kidnapping from happening. So last year we had about 1,308 animals that came into Wildwoods, and almost all of them were here directly or indirectly due to humans. So we can all play a part in preventing animals from needing to come to Wildwoods. So we're going to go over some scenarios of how we can keep animals wild. And one of those ways is kind of knowing an animal's kind of natural history and behavior. So this is a very common scenario that we get called about. And so and probably very shortly in the next month, we'll start getting calls about fawns that are found on the ground and without their mom. And so we get a lot of calls, people frantic, like, oh, there's this orphan fawn or orphan deer in our yard. But what happens is the moms, the does, will tell their fawn to kind of lie down in a certain place while they go and forage for food, especially when they're really young. They can't really keep up with mom. So if the fawn is laying down like this, it's best to leave it there and the mom will come by later. So leaving it alone, keeping pets and people away from it is the best thing that we can do, because you don't want to spook it so it feels it has to run. But if the fawn's wandering around and crying for more than a couple of hours, then it would be time to call Wildwoods. Also, if it's lying down on the ground with its legs splayed out, it has curled ear tips, which may be an indicator of dehydration. If it's not able to walk, or if it's sitting near a dead adult, if it's injured, has flies or flags on it, where it's cold or lethargic. Those are all reasons to call Wildwoods for a fawn. And always call before you bring any animal into Wildwoods, just to double check and make sure that it's a species that we can take, and also if it's needed to, if it's actually needed to actually come in. Fawns are a little bit tricky because of chronic waste disease. So if a fawn is found, we can only take fawns from certain areas of Minnesota. So we have to be very careful of where it comes from, because DNR is recommended that we only take deer from very certain areas, because we don't want chronic waste disease to spread. This is another very common scenario. Maybe the most common scenario that we calls about. We have a bunch of baby bunnies in our yard, and the mom is not around. So they must be orphaned, right? Well, Eastern cottontail moms will actually only be at their nest about twice a day. So once in the morning and once in the evening to feed. And the rest of the time they're out foraging for food. So if you're not sure if the mom is still caring for the babies, we do advise people to kind of put string over the nest in like a hashtag or tic-tac-toe formation. leave it overnight, and then check the string in the morning. So if it's been moved, then the mom is coming back and caring for the babies. But if the string has not been moved or it remains undisturbed, then it's time to call Wildwoods. Some signs that the bunnies will, that they need help, if they're cold to the touch, if you see injuries on them, if there are flies or fly eggs on the babies, or if they're lethargic. We also get lots of squirrels throughout the baby season. We usually don't see their nests because their nests are high up in the trees, but sometimes people find a group of babies at the base of a tree. And if that happens, the mom is most likely moving them to a new nest. So that may take her all day. So it's best to stay away from them so that the mom feels comfortable enough to come and get them as she's moving them. So if she hasn't moved them by dusk, then she most likely won't come back for them. Then it's time to call Wildwoods. If a baby has fallen out of the nest and it's not injured, something we advise people to do is try and read at it with the mom by placing it in a shallow box, like a dish towel on the bottom for warmth. And there's a YouTube video called Baby Squirrel in Distress. And if you play that in a loop for like an hour, it should get the mom's attention for her to come down and get her baby. And just make sure that if you're doing that, you keep out of sight so that mom feels comfortable enough for her to come down and move her baby and get her baby. If mom does not come for the baby within an hour, definitely call Wildwoods. We get lots of calls about mostly foxes, sometimes coyotes. And it's normal during spring and summer to see foxes and coyotes out during the day because they are looking for food sources to feed their babies. Once the babies are older, they'll begin kind of exploring outside of their den. If the young look alert, they should be left alone. If you see a baby that's too young to walk properly and is not outside the den, and the parents do not return, definitely give Wildwoods a call. As well as if the baby is approaching people, frequently vocalizing or appears sick or injured, definitely contact Wildwoods. I have a friend who has a fox den in her yard, and a few days ago she just saw her first little red fox kit out of the den and playing in the snow, and then went right back into that den. It's very cute. We got a lot of calls about these guys. We have sometimes birds will fall out of the nest. The first thing that we attempt, or we suggest people attempt, is to put them back in the nest if that's possible. Sometimes the nest is out of reach or it's too high. And so that returning it to the nest is not going to be possible. There are other things that we can do. So if you have like a plastic container, like a butter tub or a sour cream tub, things like that, you can line it with tissue or natural materials with holes poked in the bottom. And if you're able to kind of get that into the tree as close as the nest as possible, the parents may still continue to feed and care for the baby, but you need to kind of watch from a distance to make sure that the parents are going back to that makeshift nest. So if no adult birds return to care for the baby, then definitely call Wildwoods. If you see a baby that has feathers that's sitting on the ground, definitely watch from a distance. So if it looks kind of like this robin, it's on the ground, it may not have fallen out of the nest, because right now that particular robin is going to be too big for the nest. So they're kind of the fledgling stage of the awkward teenager phase. So they're on the ground, they're learning how to get food for themselves, and flying and hopping around and things like that. So the parents should still be taking care of them at this point. So you can kind of watch from distance and making sure the parents are still giving it food and caring for it. But if you don't see the parents after an hour or so, definitely give Wildwoods a call. So last year, we actually got a call about this guy, which is a great horned owl. And it was found in the middle of a road at night. And so the finder scooped it up and brought it to us the next morning. And we did an examination, and it was healthy and fine. We got in touch with the property owners close to where it was found. And they actually were able to locate a nest in one of their trees. And so we had a volunteer climb up that tree, and in hopes of re-nesting this owl. And so as he climbed up the tree, I put this little owlet in a bag. And then our volunteer, his name is Dave, he threw a rope down. And I attached the rope to the bag, and then once he got to the nest, he pulled the baby up in the bag, and then he was able to put the owl back in the nest where it stayed with its little nestmate. So there's another owl in the nest, and the parents continue to care for the baby. So another success story that we're really grateful to have amazing volunteers, and also property owners that care a lot for these guys, that want to see these guys stay in the wild and have the parents care for them. We get a lot of calls about turtles. If you find a baby turtle by itself, please leave it unless it's injured. When turtles hatch, they're able to swim, walk, and find their own food. Please don't keep it as a pet. Definitely leave it in the wild. So if you find a turtle that's active during early spring or late fall, again, please leave it be unless it's injured. Turtles are able to withstand cold temperatures, and some turtles can even be seen swimming around around frozen lakes and ponds. So the picture on the right is a snapping turtle that was swimming around underneath the ice in Wisconsin. And never move a turtle to another pond or another lake, another area. They have kind of like an internal homing device, and they'll always try to return to their home pond or lake. Oh, pets. So last year we had over 200 animals that were brought to Wildwoods because of injuries caused by cats and dogs, or being orphaned as a result of a cat or dog attack on their parents. So we love having our pets, and some of you saw my cat earlier, but they can pose a real threat to wildlife, and wildlife can also pose a very serious threat to their health and safety as well. And according to the American Bird Conservancy, cats kill approximately 2.4 billion birds per year. And another study states that cats kill between 6.9 and 20.7 billion small mammals per year in the US. That's a pretty major, it's pretty significant. And so there are fewer studies about how many animals are killed by dogs and how many they're impacted by dogs. They're still responsible for many deaths and injuries. Wildwoods actually, last couple of years, have seen more animals come in because of dogs than cats. And then our pets can also be a target for other animals that may attack or injure them, even just if they're just defending themselves, like this poor dog on the left who met a porcupine, and it did not go well for the dog or the porcupine, because now that porcupine has to grow all those quills, is now going to be more vulnerable to other wild species that may want to eat it, and it's not going to be able to effectively defend itself because it has to regrow all those quills. But they can also be infected with other diseases like the roundworm I talked about earlier, rabies, distemper, salmonella. There's a lot of diseases, and a lot of those can also be spread to humans as well. So things to do to keep your pet from interacting with wildlife was, we always encourage that we keep cats indoors. If they catch an animal without killing it, it's still in great danger of dying. So cats pounce on the prey, cause internal injuries. Their teeth create deep puncture wounds that often become infected. And any animal that is caught by a cat needs to be brought to Wildwoods for treatment, because it's that serious. If a dog finds a rabbit nest and moves the bunnies, please put the bunnies back in the nest if they're not injured. And if you know that there's a rabbit nest in your yard, one thing you can do to protect the bunny nest is cover it with like a weighted laundry basket, or you could stake it down during the day, because the mom, again, is only going to come back to the nest really in the morning and in the evening to feed. So you can protect it from your dogs during the day by kind of putting a weighted or staked down laundry basket over it to protect it. We've had a lot of success with that, but just it's important to never leave it covered overnight because the mom needs to come and feed. Vehicle collisions are another have reason that we see a lot of animals in Wildwoods. So last year we had 55 animals that were brought in and hit by a car or another vehicle. And no one wants to hit an animal with their car, but there's definitely driving measures that you can take to avoid that situation. A lot of these are going to be obvious and things we already do, but it's always good to remind ourselves of these things, like scanning the road and shoulders ahead of you, using high beams if there's no oncoming traffic at night. If there's collision that is unavoidable, apply the brakes firmly and remain in your lane. And then be extra cautious at dawn and dusk, and always wear a seatbelt, and always make sure that you're awake, alert, and sober. Window strikes are another, especially in the fall migration season, is why we get a lot of birds that come in. Up to about 1 billion birds are killed each year by window strikes. Last year we had 58 birds that was determined, that was like definite for sure reason why they came to Wildwoods. A lot of times we do get animals that we don't know what happened to them. People find them, but we're not totally sure. But 58 is what we definitely had, that definitely were witnessed like hitting a window last year. So they hit windows because of the reflection. They don't see it as a barrier. They're unable to fly through. Sometimes they see their own reflection and they try to attack it to defend their territory. That happens a lot in the springtime when their hormones are kind of running high. So definitely we've gotten calls of like, why is this robin attacking the window and will not leave? It's because it's seeing itself and it's not recognizing that's itself in the window and not another robin. So some things that we can do to prevent window strikes is that we can put dark colored bird silhouettes on your windows to let birds know they can't go through them. A more decorative option are some static stickers on windows. And if you want to go all out, there's actually bird safety glass that's transparent for humans, but also lets birds know that there's a barrier there because they can see different wavelengths than we can. A lot of people put food out for animals, and that also can be risky for different reasons. So leaving food out for animals like deer, raccoons can result in the spread of diseases and parasites among wild animals and pets, and interactions between wild animals and pets that can result in injury or illness. So, you know, in springtime, it's a good time to put bird feeders away just because mostly it's bears, but also kind of keeping food or food source kind of locked down and not available to animals. It's going to be important for that as well. We also get a lot of calls about nuisance animals, or what people describe as nuisance animals. And they just don't want these animals in their yard. And we don't, you know, we're not that kind of service where if you don't want, you know, an animal in your yard, we're not going to go and get it. There's some of these animals can be encouraged to safely move on, but it may take a little bit of patience. So raccoons are one of them. So if there's a raccoon den, the babies are content, it's best to leave them where they're at. They're going to be very vocal if they're hungry. If you've ever heard baby raccoons, they'll definitely know that sentiment is true. They are very, very vocal when they're hungry. If they've been crying for several hours, mom has not returned, call Wildwoods. But if their den is in a place where it's not appropriate for them, we can encourage the mom to kind of move her babies to another place on her own. So shining a light near the entrance of the den and playing talk radio works. And so this will make her feel like the area is unsafe and she'll move her babies to a new location. It may take a few days. So please be patient while she kind of finds a new den. The Wildlife Rehab Center of Roseville a couple of years ago had a really great video of this. They had been contacted by someone who had a boat in their yard, and the boat was uncovered, but the raccoons made their den in this boat, and not a great place for them to have this den, especially if they want to use that boat. So they put a trail cam up along with, you know, shining a spotlight near the entrance and playing talk radio. And sure enough, mom took the baby somewhere else. So that was a really cool thing to see. With skunks, we use the same advice. Pointing a spotlight at the den entrance and playing talk radio can encourage them to leave. And again, it may take a few days. We really don't encourage live trapping of skunks and also other animals in the springtime because you could be, accidentally creating orphans of the babies. And for skunks, it's especially important because it's actually illegal to rehabilitate skunks in Minnesota, I believe Wisconsin as well. So we really don't want to separate the mom from the babies because there's nothing that anyone can do with babies other than kind of let them be and hope that they can make it on their own, which oddly enough, not oddly enough, but like won't be possible. So, we definitely try and get people to try to get the mom to move her babies on her own. Just takes a little bit of patience. Tree removal it can be pretty big, especially in the springtime when things start melting and people want to spend more time outside. Trees are a source of food and shelter for many species of animals. So we try and encourage people avoiding having trees removed during the property during baby season. So birds, squirrels, other animals will have their nests in trees. Removing trees during baby season will cause a lot of orphan animals to then need care. So the best time for tree removal is going to be in the fall once baby season is over. And even though we work to prevent human interactions with wildlife and cause them to need treatment and care, it's not always possible. So in these cases, our goal is to rehabilitate them and return them back into the wild. And so we have some happy endings, which is like talked about kind of the not quite so happy part of the job of humane euthanasia. The happy part and the best part of the job is seeing these animals released. And so this is the snapping turtle photo that I kind of showed towards the beginning. This is the snapping turtle all healed up. Kind of see the scar on the shell, but we're going to see him as he's released back to where he was found. A little suspicious. There he goes. Last year, we don't often get mergansers, but last year we had common mergansers and hooded mergansers, and then we even had a hooded merganser wood duck hybrid that actually came from Jesse, who's also part of this program, who was also released at the same site. But we had some common mergansers that came in. If you're familiar with Duluth, they were found on London Road by the London Road Car Wash and gas station. Obviously not an appropriate place to release them back into the wild. But for waterfowl, we need places that there's no motorboats and it's kind of a private area where they can hunt and be released. And at Wildwoods, we had a diving pool for them, but obviously weren't able to have a lake for them. And so they're a little unsure of this new area. But once they get to the water, they figured out pretty quickly. This is one of my favorite releases last year. There they go. And then we also had a northern saw-whet owl. And I forget exactly what happened with the solid owl. We do get quite a lot of these guys in the fall and winter as they're migrating and may have hit a window. We get a lot of solid owls that hit windows. This one's a pretty short, even though it's slow motion, of this tiny owl's release. And we send our raptors down to the Raptor Center. And they also want to release, when appropriate, raptors where they were found. And so we had sent this solid owl down to the Raptor Center. They treated it, and when it was ready for release, it came back up, and there it goes. This rough-legged hawk, it's a dark morph rough-legged hawk, which is one of my favorite types of hawks. Was found and had a compound fracture, which means it was an open fracture. At one point, the bone was kind of sticking out of the wing, but we were able to bandage it. And we sent it down to the Raptor Center, and they performed surgery and treated it, and they sent it back up here when it was ready for release. And then this is going to be kind of an awkward release because I thought that the bird was facing away from us, and I was surprised when they opened up the top that was actually facing us. So it's going to be a little bit weird. It doesn't get as close to me as it looks because I'm the one holding the camera. But you can also see that on one of the legs, there's a metal band, and the Raptor Center bands the birds before they release. And there it goes. Kind of awkward angle of my camera phone. So definitely those are kind of the happy endings to some of these stories. And it's also the most rewarding part of the job is to see these animals back into the wild. And kind of to help do this, we do, Wildwoods does run on donations. So it's our quick little plug. It's not unfortunately free to care for these animals, but we do run donations. If you're interested in donating or contacting us for further information, you can give us a phone call. You can address right there, or visit our website or email us. Okay, if anyone has any questions, you can either unmute yourself to ask those questions, or you could put those questions in the chat.
Valerie, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I just want to say thank you for all you do. I sit on the board of Wildwoods, and I missed our retreat a month ago, and what a delight to hear about the work and hear directly from someone that's doing the work. And yeah, what a gift Wildwoods has been. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay. Thanks, Jesse. Any other questions anyone has? If not, thank you guys so much for coming to this program. And yeah, we have a wolf program on April 27th. That's going to be put on by Wildwoods, but also it's going to be our board director, Mike, who is a wildlife biologist. And then I believe it's May 12th, another member of our board is going to be doing a program on beavers. So if you're interested in either of those programs, definitely email me at valerie@wildwoodsrehab.org. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for being here, and have a great rest of your Sunday.